Hello, everyone. Welcome to the next show, Patient Horror Stories, some really bad things that have happened to our patients over the years. We're going to have an open discussion with the intention of going over learning points, because the truth is that healthcare hospitals can be very dangerous. That is reflected in statistics. That doesn't mean that all of the staff, including doctors and nurses, are not trying their best, but this is pretty much universal across countries. And we're going to present to you 3 horror stories from our careers. And for those of you who enjoy our discussions, please make sure that you have signed up for our separate, unique channel where we post a lot of exclusive content, health and well-being, tips, advice, and other discussions all about your health. Okay, so let's go then. Peter, you want to go first?
Sure. Where do we start on this topic? So this goes back a while back when I covered the emergency room. And as a cardiologist, that's part of my duty. I cover the emergency room. It's a really crazy place. And if you can imagine as a patient going in for what can be somewhat of a controllable condition of an irregular heartbeat and almost dying as a result. So this happened one night. I was on call for the emergency room and I got a call, and this was a pretty straightforward case as a cardiologist to get at night. It was someone that came in with atrial fibrillation, which is an irregular heartbeat from the small chamber of the heart, and the heart rate was going really fast. And the patient was symptomatic. And so what we normally do is try to control the heart rate of the patient. And there's lots of different medications we can do this. And some people have heard of them, like metoprolol or diltiazem. So this patient, their heart rate was going fast, and the patient was going to be admitted to the hospital. So one of the things we did is we put the patient on a drip. So it's an IV bag that has a medication in that gets solely infused through an IV line going into the patient. And the patient was started on diltiazem, which in itself is a safe medication and often used and a very common medication to use in an emergency room setting. And so this patient was admitted to the medical floor a few hours later, only to get the call that the patient is now unresponsive. And this became a code or rapid response in the hospital where they announce it overhead, and any available medical personnel is required to go there and essentially resuscitate the patient. And when people got there, they had no clue really what was going on because the patient was just unresponsive. And in the emergency room, the patient was awake and alert and can talk, and everything looked fine. Unfortunately, what happened was that the diltiazem medication was stored right next to another medication, which is insulin. And as a lot of people might know, insulin is used for diabetics, and this was not a diabetic patient. So the patient was put on a high dose of insulin as a drip, continuously infusing into their bloodstream. And by the time the patient got to the medical floor, they completely bottomed out their blood sugars and became severely hypoglycemic, which is a medical emergency, and was unresponsive. And this patient, if left longer, really, really could have died. And it just shows you what a straightforward medication can change dramatically if a medical error is made.
Absolutely. Wow. That's crazy. So diltiazem, which is a medicine we commonly give. I mean, I prescribe it all the time in the hospital for controlling heart rate often. And you mean it was mixed up? So insulin was given instead.
So what actually happened
next to each other?
Yes. They stored it in a refrigerator in the emergency room. The 2 bags are right next to each other. The nurses, who are probably overworked and busy in crowded emergency rooms, took the wrong bag and put that up instead of diltiazem.
Goodness.
Which is really just a complete
That is
disaster.
shocking. I mean, personally, I've never seen anything like that before with that particular medicine. And we should stress these stories are to stimulate a discussion and learning points, because in healthcare, we always want to get better. And this won't happen 99% of the time. But it's important to note when a serious error occurs, what learning points we can take on board from that, don't you think? What are your thoughts on that story, Ben?
No, I completely agree. I actually don't blame the nurse in that situation at all. That shouldn't be possible. Like, the refrigerator should be such that it's labeled so differently or in such a different section that you would have to go way out of your way to grab it. So, I mean, to me, that's a failure of setting the thing up from the beginning. And there's so many things like that in healthcare that, it's a shame we have to wait till certain things occur to realize, we should have done it differently. But Yeah, it's one of those things that is just so scary, and it just should never happen.
Subsequently, the whole protocol of the hospitals changed after that and starting medications. But you can imagine that this has happened to one patient who is really healthy, and really it can happen to anyone. And really, a lot of the danger zones in patients is handoff, right? And we know that doctors, when they're handing off to other doctors, sign out or giving history of patient or nurse from the emergency room to the medical floor is when medication errors can happen.
And there are multiple checks there. And I've noticed a similar pattern. Usually and every doctor will tell you a story like this, there's been something bad that has happened because healthcare is by nature, it is a risky place to be because you have people that are sick. I always interestingly find it fascinating when people say, well, you have to make healthcare in hospitals like flying a plane, which is very safe because there's multiple protocols. Well, to an extent, that's true, but planes are in the best possible shape before they are flown, whereas people come into hospital usually sick. So that alone makes it more risky. But coming back to the point, what I've seen is whenever anything bad happens, usually there's meetings. And I think the US, to be fair, is quite good at this. Hospitals will get together, work out what happened, and try to stop it from happening again.
No, I completely agree with you. I do think one of the most important things about a healthcare system is to have the ability to put into place a new protocol once you realize there's something wrong. So that kudos to, whoever changed everything after that event. But that's so important. We have to learn from our mistakes. That's the most important thing you can do.
Yeah. And that poor nurse was probably, I can imagine, felt absolutely awful.
So of course.
Usually these are good professionals who this happened to. Yeah.
The patient almost died, and think about the guilt and just how distraught everyone was actually, who was, even people who weren't directly involved. It was just a really, really bad situation. Fortunately, the patient did find, clearly explained to the patient of what happened, and the family understood at the end. But again, it should never happen. It just highlights the dangers of we use these medications so routinely, but used in just a simply wrong way, and just a split second can change.
Can destroy a life. And what advice can we give? Because ultimately, you are the ones that matter. We are making this show for you because we want the best possible outcome and the best possible health for everyone listening and watching. What advice can we give to anyone watching who thinks, well, I don't want a mistake like this to happen to me or a loved one? Would it involve double checking before a medicine is administered? So I personally think that's great advice. When you're in the hospital, a loved one, just say what is being given.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think double check. There are protocols in place where nurses, doctors, everybody have to double, triple check. But just to create a safety net and do something, aggressive that you can do, just say, hey, what is that? What medication are you giving me and why? Every time. And there's no reason why you
I think
can't.
that's great advice.
Why you can't ask that as a patient. I would ask that every single time if somebody gave me something, but why are you giving me that and what is it? And then if it makes sense, say, okay. But if it doesn't, say, well, can you ask whoever's supervising you if that's okay?
Yeah.
Very reasonable.
I agree. But I will be honest with you, even as a doctor in the times, if I've been in the emergency room, you don't necessarily always you always, I guess, assume that everything you're given is safe, and you don't always ask. So that's really important, is to ask. Any IV bag that's hung, we just assume it could be like saline solution that you get when you're dehydrated, but you just never know. You always have to ask and be your own advocate.
Absolutely. By the way, I don't know what saline is. I know what saline is. Normal saline. Do you know how many years people in the US have made fun of me for saying saline? But I will always say normal saline. But anyway, all joking aside, that's a really important point there about double checking and advocate. Having a health advocate. So often when people come into hospital, they're not well. I think this is frequently the difference between life and death. If you have someone who's there, whether it's a spouse, husband, wife, mother, father, child, I can tell you this. There are some staff who might sort of roll their eyes at, the loved one's with them, checking out. I'm telling you, do not give a whatever about the feelings of medical staff. You have a loved one in the hospital, be there as much as you can.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we would do the same for our loved ones. So I think you should, and don't let anyone make you feel odd for doing that. All right. Well, that was fantastic. Thank you, Peter. One of fantastic learning points, but a terrible situation. Ben, do you want to share with us your patient horror story?
Sure. So I was in residency, I was in training, and I was a third year at the time. And there was an intern, and an intern is a first year resident who's just learning. So they've gotten out of medical school, they've read all the books, they've taken all the tests, but they're beginning to learn how to actually take care of patients in a real time scenario. And there are guardrails in place and there's supervision in place. But one time, a nurse called one of the interns and said, "Hey, this patient's blood pressure is a little bit high." Most of the time, most seasoned docs would say, "That's fine. It's not high enough that I would necessarily do anything. We'll keep an eye on it, or do something very mild, give them a little dose of something to bring it down." So she requested hydralazine, which sometimes you can give through the IV, through an injection, and 5 milligrams, 10 milligrams is, not unheard of. And sometimes people will give that. She wanted 100 milligrams given. And so is a very big dose of IV hydralazine. And so the nurse said, "Absolutely not. I'm not giving that. What are you talking about? You have to go ask your supervising doctor." And she said, "No." "Well, then you hand it to me." And she walked up and she drew it up herself and she pushed it and the patient crashed, of course. And the patient crashed. Yeah, my goodness, heart stopped. It was a disaster. Went to the ICU. They resuscitated the patient. Turned out the IV had kind of infiltrated, like not all of it went in. And the ICU attending, I remember him saying, he said, "There must be a God, because if this had all gone in, I don't know if we could have reversed this very well. But thank goodness only some of it went in, so we were able to reverse this." And the person lived and they were okay. But this one to me highlights supervision, because everyone has to train and everyone has to learn. This person should never have been allowed to make decisions like that without significant supervision, and obviously wasn't prepared to do so. So, I think you see this a lot more in training facilities, but, it's definitely something that's a big issue. I mean, people have to train. They have to be allowed to be in environments where they can practice and learn. But, at what point, should you pull the leash on the tiger if they're making decisions that are too dangerous?
And that's true. I mean, it really highlights a point of just having your confidence in yourself and the training and knowing where your limits are. And I think that's really important in medicine as a doctor, that I know that there's certain conditions that would be better treated at a bigger hospital or better treated by another doctor. But this is a perfect example. So hopefully this resident intern had learned from the mistake, and anything positive coming out of this is they will probably always listen to the nurse.
Okay, everyone, I'm going to interrupt that tremendous discussion for a moment to tell you about our expanding health and well-being store. I'm very proud of our natural, uniquely formulated products. Check in the links down below. We've got our natural anti-inflammation immune support, bone support, memory support, heart support, and sleep support. Also, our newly released organic chai mix based on the tea that I regularly drink. We are made in the USA and very proud to be working with a veteran-owned company. Ohighwellness.com if you're in the USA, North America. Ohighwellness.co if you're in the UK, Europe. All right, back to the discussion. Yeah, absolutely. And that is something that I don't think enough younger doctors respect, is the experience and wisdom of nurses. And looking back, you graduate, you're very young, early 20s, and you have that often bluster about wanting to get the job done. And if any, there probably aren't many, but if any young people in medicine, doctors, or even nurses, any professional, if you're listening, you've just graduated, maybe you could tell any relatives of yours, your children or grandchildren who are in this position, always listen to the experienced nurses. They have they'll save your decades of experience, and they will save your whatever. Yeah, absolutely.
You're behind.
Yeah.
Many
Exactly.
Put aside your little ego and just listen, because again, they could cost someone their life.
Yeah, right. That's true. All right. So my turn then. My story. This was a few years ago, over several years ago, and I was practicing hospital medicine. I had a number of patients, and there was one patient, I remember, she was getting better, ready to go probably the next day. And we were checking over her labs, and her magnesium was low. So I thought, let's replete her magnesium. especially because I think we may have been dealing with a cardiac condition. So we're always careful with magnesium levels, super important. And I gave the request to my junior to administer IV magnesium, intravenous magnesium. Usually we administer 1 to 2 grams. So I have no idea how this happened. So I'll tell you what happened in a moment. But anyway, I go home that day thinking, well, that patient is going to be discharged. Come in the next day, and one of the first things that I hear from the nurse is, this patient, it's really weird. She's barely waking up. She's really lethargic. What's happening? I mean, she was relatively young. She told me, and then I was sitting at a computer anyway. So I thought, let me quickly look at the vitals and the labs before I run in the room. And I looked over the labs, and the magnesium level was sky high, really high. And I thought, this is weird. Let me look over the medicines really quickly. And it turned out that my junior had accidentally started a magnesium drip, an intravenous magnesium instead of a one-time dose. So she was getting magnesium all night. And remember, when I saw that, my heart just literally sunk. And I thought, this is weird. How could IV magnesium even be dispensed as a drip? Because we rarely prescribe that. And I ran in the room. Sure enough, she was lethargic. We immediately stopped the magnesium. Then we did some other things. We gave her fluids. Thankfully, thank goodness, she was okay within a few hours. And of course, we explained what happened. And she ended up going home later that day. But that could have been absolutely disastrous. And this gets to another point, which is what we call the Swiss cheese model in health and medicine. I think it can be used in other arenas as well, where a series of things goes wrong. So firstly, it was my junior who prescribed it, who was not very experienced. And then the pharmacy staff as well, the member who dispensed it, was also brand new. Magnesium got prescribed as a drip. The nurse who was on was also, go figure, a new nurse, so didn't raise any red flags. So this lady got put on magnesium intravenous all night. And my goodness, that patient was really lucky to have nothing happen to her and got better within a few hours. But do you want to explain, Ben, what the Swiss cheese model is? Because this is super important. It gets to a bigger point of how medical errors occur.
So the Swiss cheese model is, as you can imagine, a piece of Swiss cheese. It has a bunch of holes in it. So in healthcare, as in many other industries that have to do with safety, there are multiple kind of checks and balances and roadblocks along the way that are supposed to protect you from errors. So if it's not caught by the first person, it will be caught by the second, the third, or the fourth. The Swiss cheese model basically is when every single one of these safeguards fails. And you can see that in these very specific examples, like the one that Dr. Dan just gave about everyone was brand new. So all the people that it should have triggered, it didn't trigger. So, the Swiss cheese model will always prevail. You will always it will always be possible if your safeguards aren't strong enough. And that's why it's so important in healthcare and other industries to have safety and safeguards that are so airtight that it is very hard to overwhelm them.
Yeah. And again, I want to stress, these are not common things. I remember that hospital I was working was a particularly smaller hospital that I was covering at the time. And these are very unusual, but every doctor outlet or even nurse will tell you a story like this, where something has happened and disaster has been averted. And it might happen to 1 in every 300 patients, but it really sticks in your mind. And that's how you learn. There's probably parallels in every other industry as well, how a series of things can go wrong. But obviously in medicine, you have lives on the line. So what we want to really emphasize is that healthcare, by its nature, these things can happen, but usually, well, nearly all the time, that they are averted. Somebody experienced will come in, but mistakes can happen, and we all have horror stories, and we learn from them. Ultimately, now, well, I would never prescribe a magnesium drip anyway. When is it used? Just for
mainly in obstetrics and gynecology. You use it. There's a condition called preeclampsia, where magnesium can be administered in large doses. So drips are not unheard of, but a drip over this long a period of time with the concentration that was probably delivered and somebody doesn't need it is dangerous.
So magnesium itself is not dangerous when used appropriately. Like magnesium supplements are great. I always prescribe them to a lot of my patients. But again, medications used improperly or anything can be very dangerous.
Yeah, completely agree. I take magnesium supplements as well. They're great for sleep purposes, even leg cramps in some people. But yeah, as a drip intravenous atrial fibrillation, yeah, I mean, magnesium is great. Most people are magnesium deficient, but that doesn't mean that you go on a drip for hours and hours, have huge concentrations. And yeah, I mean, that would be what I learned from it, was that you should be very careful with junior staff, oversee how they are ordering things. This was on the computer, and you need certain checks in place for everybody else. But we really wish you watching the very best. Let's end with some closing statements on the best thing that anybody can do to avoid a medical error. I mean, the statistics, let's be fair, there are thousands of these. If you look statistically at errors, most of them are very minor, thankfully, but they do occur. Know this, that most hospitals out there take them very seriously, and most doctors will feel absolutely terrible when one happens. No doctor wants errors to occur, but healthcare it's a dangerous arena frequently. It really is. So closing statements from each of us. Would you like to go first, Peter?
Yes. I mean, never just assume that everything is safe. Always ask. Don't ever be afraid to stand up. Don't ever feel that it's not the right thing to do, because mistakes happen, as we highlighted in these 3 stories. Always question everything you're given, and if you need to be on it.
Yeah.
Try to have an advocate if you can, not to steal Sunil's point, but always try to have an advocate with you. Somebody, if you're unable to make decisions, always try to have somebody who's going to help and look out for you while you're in the hospital. And as Peter said, always know what's going into you. What are they giving you? What is it for?
I completely agree. I echo that. Always know exactly what you or a loved one is being given. And if you have questions, ask. And don't be afraid to ask the staff as well. If something is being administered, what's the worst thing you've ever seen happen with this particular medication? It's all about being informed. Ultimately, it's your body, and it's your health, it's your future and your family's future as well. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for watching. We do hope that that was insightful. Once more, if you enjoyed this discussion, please make sure that you have signed up for our separate exclusive channel down below, where we post a lot of special content, linked down below in the description. Also, do check out the other links below, including our natural health and wellbeing store, ohighwellness.com. If you're in the USA, North America, ohighwellness.co. If you're in the UK, Europe. All right, everyone, wishing you the best from all 3 of us, and we will speak again very soon.